Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy. And this is my Axure 10 Core Skills course. I've been using Axure since February 2011, and I've been teaching it for many, many years. And in fact, I've been one of Axure's recommended trainers since 2014. This course is designed to take you from super Axure newbie or Axure afraid all the way through to confident intermediate. So if you've landed on this one video, there are many, many others. Please check our Axure lessons playlist for a lot more videos about using Axure. The Delta CX YouTube channel has over 500 videos on it as of when I'm recording this in December 2021, and I hope you'll subscribe and join in some of our live streams. I'm live usually 3 or 4 times a week with teaching UX research and design, talking about CX, helping people get into the profession, helping leaders and managers, and of course, don't forget Tuesday, office hours, Ask Me Anything. So subscribe and hang out here. So thanks for being here. Please subscribe and let's jump into that next Axure lesson.
Another neat use of dynamic panels would be to create different types of error or success or other informational messaging. Here we are on our form page, and let's imagine that we had something that was happening here maybe once people filled out a form where we had to give people some sort of success or error or warning message of some other style. So let's start by designing what those messages would look like, and then we'll write some interactions to make them appear. So I'm going to start with a dynamic panel because, again, I love to do it so that if anything shows, hides, moves, changes, or pins, it's a dynamic panel. And this is certainly something that's going to show and hide. This message is kind of gigantic. Let's try 60 pixels high. Again, it's totally up to you how big you want your messages to be, but I'm imagining kind of a top of page toast message or message of some sort that people might have to X out, but we'll learn both. We'll learn both the message that people have to X out and the message that goes away itself after a certain amount of time. So I'm going to call this the messages panel so that I can easily find it when I'm writing my interactions. And now let's go into some states of this panel. I'll also jump to the outline so we can get a good look at what's going on. And let's imagine that first we have some sort of success message. So I will imagine that this state of the panel, maybe it's got a rounded rectangle behind it. So I can drag out a box. And I can make that box the full size of the panel we just created. I'm not sure that is the full size of the panel we just created. It looks a little short. I don't know why Axure snapped so funny. I think I've got 840 by 60 for my panel. If I'm not sure, I can always come back out, click away from stuff, and click on this panel. Okay, this panel is 840 by 60. I'm going to double click on this state and go back into it. And we could create a global widget style for this. Now you might say, well, Deb, this is just one thing. Why do we need a global style? Maybe you have these messages showing up on other pages and you want to make sure that the styles are consistent across pages. Sure, you could style them manually once, and then you could copy and paste this panel to other pages, but just for continued good practice, I'm going to create different styles. So success message. So let's imagine that our success message is some sort of medium or dark green. And let's imagine that it's got a big font on it so nobody misses the important message we have for them. It's a white font. Make sure your color contrast is going to be good there so it's red on your background color. And we might also say it's a bold font, up to you. Oop. And we might want some rounded corners on this box. I'll give it 12s. And we want all the lines. There won't be a stroke around this, so I'll say border thickness 0. We don't want a line around this. Let's start with that and see how it looks. All right, remember we created a style, but we didn't apply the style. So this would be success message. And I can just type something right here. Now, you might say, I don't want my message to be centered like that. And so, we'll need to update our global widget style, but let's say we also put in an icon, because very often it's important to message not just with color, but with an icon. So if we want to show success, maybe we show a check mark. Again, that might be a terrible icon. That might make people think that they can click on it. But I'm just going to run with it for now, and you can put in a better icon. And let's see where I've put it. Let's see, put it 25 pixels, so X25. Now you might want this text to be closer to this. We can change that with the global widget styling. We can go back and say, and we can kind of watch it happen as we go. We can say that for this style, which is success message, where did it go? I do wish these were searchable because sometimes I can't find the one I'm looking for. Here it is, success message. All right, let's take a look at left justifying the text and then giving it some padding, maybe 50. Not enough. 90. That looks nice. All right, so there we go. So perhaps that is our success message. And we're going to need a couple of other things while we're here in icons, or at least one thing, and that is what icons call times. If you want to have this standard X in the top corner to close it, sure, you can type X with a font. I'm going to use this icon, and I'll color it white, and of course I will make it much smaller. So is this white? Almost white, totally white. Okay, I'm going to make it significantly smaller. Let's try 12. Because these are typically small, but you know what I'm going to say next. We love users, and we don't want them to have to try to get their mouse exactly on that X. We want them to not hate life so much, and so you know I'm going to put a hotspot over it so that we are not so sad about trying to click a tiny clickable area. So let's bring out that hotspot and give people a nice clickable or tappable area. Now that's a bit much. That's 100 by 100. We don't have to go that far, but I would probably want to do at least something like this, something that's at least 40-ish in each direction, so that we've got a larger tappable, clickable area. Now, what will that thing do? That's going to make this message go away. Well, what is this message? The message is a state in a dynamic panel. So if we want the X to appear to close this or dismiss this, then it is in effect hiding the messages panel. Also, I'm going to sneak in here and click on state 1, and let's call this success, because we are going to make multiple messages here and play with different outcomes that are all in the same space. So they're all in the same dynamic panel, different pictures in the frame. So if people wanted to close this panel, they would be clicking on the hotspot. So write your interaction on the hotspot. Let's pop it out. Click or tap. Show or hide. So remember, dismissing this, closing it is really a hide. What are we hiding? The entire messages panel. Make sure you choose hide. Maybe you'd like a dramatic fade out. Okay. Now, we can baby step test this, because right now people can see this panel. We haven't said this is hidden by default. People can see it. We can do a preview, and we can take a look at what this would look like if it were already shown and we are Xing it out. And I'll show you shortly how to make it appear and disappear. So if I click this, fade out. Okay, so that is working. That's good. That feels good. Now, by default, people would not see this thing. It would be hidden. So I'm going to click this eyeball and hide it. Now, of course, we get the yellow mask telling us that there is some sort of thing here that by default people can't see, but of course we can still work on if we would like. Now, just for fun and semi-realism, I'm going to drag out a button under all of these forms. I'm going to pretend that once we filled out this ugly form that we need to submit it. So I'll just write submit on this thing. And let's imagine that based on some different conditions, ooh, hint, hint, we are going to show people a success message, an information message, an error message. We're going to build in all kinds of messages, both in this lesson and the next lesson. So let's use that button as what creates the action. Now, for now, we can quite simply say, when someone hits the submit button, we show them the messages panel and they see the success message. Now, how do we know that they'll see the success message? Because it is currently the only state, though we will make more, but it's the first state. So if we don't tell Axure which panel state to show deliberately as part of our interaction, it will show either the first one at the top of the list or the last one that was visible. So let's go to this button and let's build that we want to show people the success message. When people click on this button, show the messages panel. Maybe it's got a lovely fade in. And there you go. Let's baby step test it. All right, so submit, success, fantastic. Exit out. Now remember, in some cases, we want a message to appear, stay for a certain amount of time, and then disappear. We don't necessarily want to interrupt people's workflow to make them have to X the message out. If you've ever used LinkedIn, and if you've ever posted something to LinkedIn or edited your post, you know how annoying it is where LinkedIn leaves that message up there and it never goes away and you have to go exit out, even though you feel like, yeah, LinkedIn, I know, I edited it and you said it's a success. Okay, you can go now. So let's talk about how we would create the interaction if we wanted the submit button to show the message, have the message stay there a certain amount of time, and then go away. So I'm going to double click on this so I can change my interaction. In essence, you are writing a little program for our Axure robot. Show the panel, yup, then scroll all the way down in actions and look for wait. Wait. Now, of course, each 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. How long do you want that up there? If you really, really hope that people see the message, then you want the message up there a while. If it's a tiny message, then 3 seconds. But just as an example, I'm going to put it up for 7 seconds. So remember, Axure's going to do these things in order because Axure's a good robot. So we can say, show it, wait, and then hide it. It really is that simple. Messages panel, hide, fade out. So make sure you've picked hide. If yours doesn't go away, you might still have show over here. So make sure it's show, wait, hide. And now we can test that out, though we're going to have to be patient for 7 seconds. So I will click the button. 1 hippopotamus, 2 hippopotamus, 3 hippopotamus, 4 hippopotamus, 5 hippopotamus, 6 hippopotamus, 7 hippopotamus, and seen. Great. So again, you can see how that felt like a long amount of time and you feel driven to put it up there shorter, but you don't have to, because remember, if someone really hates how long that message is up there, they can end all of that early by just clicking the X, and it'll go away. It's not going to come back and hide itself again. Once it's gone, it's gone. So having a slightly longer toast type of message is not necessarily a bad thing if you want to be semi-sure that people saw it, but then do them a favor and make it go away automatically. Now, let's also think about a few other things that I want to build in at this point. One that I would like to build in is, what if our form was really long and the submit button happened to be lower on the page? People had to scroll down to get to the submit button. It's just way down here for some reason. And then let's imagine there's even more junk on the page under that. So let's imagine that our page is longer, and we've scrolled down to it, and now we click the submit button. Well, guess what? That message is on right now, but we can't see it. It's up here. Oops. Okay, so what So what does that mean? That means chances are we really wish that this message would pin based on a certain location on the page. Now, Axure can do that with dynamic panels, which is another reason why this isn't a group. We do have an entire lesson coming up later on more cool things you can do with pinning panels. But for now, let's learn how we're going to do it here so you have a little preview of pinning panels. That's why I always say, if it shows, hides, moves, changes, or is pinned, you probably want a dynamic panel. So with the dynamic panel selected, I'm going to go to Style, and I'm going to click Pin to Browser. See, it's a text link here. And it's going to pop up, and first we have to turn it on by checking this box, which means if you ever want to turn off something being pinned, you come in and uncheck it. So first of all, I want to make sure it is perfectly centered. I don't want this to be off to the left or off to the right, perfectly centered. Now for the top, it's giving me a margin of 22 because right now this thing is 22 pixels from the top, and yes, we do want it in the front so that this doesn't accidentally show up layered behind other things. So let's say we always want this message to be, maybe we have a big header on our website and we always want this to be some other measurement. It doesn't have to be 22. We can click on it and we can say this is always 80 pixels from the top. Now let's take a look at how this is working. We scroll down, we hit submit, and boom, 80 pixels from the top, which is this line here, we have this message. It stays 7 seconds and it goes away. Now notice it doesn't have any kind of light box effect like we talked about earlier, where the whole rest of the page is slightly transparent black and you're stuck looking at only this. I don't recommend that. I don't think that's the way to go. I think you could play with we could play with Treat as Lightbox if you don't put on that background color. And let me show you why that might be something you want to do for your interaction design, but again, totally optional. Let's add a Treat as Lightbox. Remember, it's always added to the show. So I would say Show, More Options, Special Behavior, Treat as Lightbox, but with a completely see-through background color. Now, do you remember what that will do? So what it will do is when I click the submit button, it will bring up the message. And of course, if I X out the message, it'll go away. But Lightbox means if I click anywhere outside of the panel that came up or showed, the panel will go away without an animation. So if I click over here, the panel goes away. No, I can't make it fade. This is just the way Axure lightboxes work. If you click outside of the lightbox just disappears. If I do this again, if I click inside the panel stays, but oops, I clicked outside of it, now it's gone. So if this were, and 7 seconds is up, let's start again. So if I click inside of the panel stays, but my 7 seconds is feeling short now. But as soon as I click outside of it, that's it. It goes away. So you can decide whether or not you want the Treat as Lightbox, where when they click anywhere on the screen, the message goes away. That may or may not match your intentions. So remember, if you decide you don't want that, then we go into More Options, and instead of Treat as Lightbox, we say None. All right. And we certainly don't want to push-pull because this is going to appear on top of other things. There we go. Now if I click out here, nothing happens. I'm clicking, clicking. This thing is still here. So that's without Treat as Lightbox, which is probably the better way to go, but I wanted to make sure you thought about the other possibility. Now let's create another message so we can see what happens when we want to give people different messages on a page. So let's go into our panel, view all, and let's duplicate this and let's come up with another message we might possibly want to give someone. That was the success message. Let's give them an error message. So we are not going to want a happy little tree here, checkbox. We'll probably want some sort of other icon. Let's see, so maybe just for fun, maybe I pick a warning triangle. And if we want that to line up, then it has to be at X25, Okay, that's X25. I'll need to make it white. Now I am manually coloring these white, but of course you could make a global widget style and say these icons have a certain color, totally up to you. This would probably say warning, error, let's see, danger, warning, mayday, please fix the thing. All right, and we might not want green for that, so let's go into our global widget styles and come up with a global style that will act as our error message. Now, where's my success message? Here's my success message. I'm going to duplicate it. I'll call it error message, and it will have could have a red background. I could go with plum if I want to be really interesting, but I guess I'll go with kind of a brick red. But again, be careful of color blindness. People who are colorblind might not be able to see that red, so they might go more by the icon, so include that icon. We created a style, but we didn't apply the style, so I'm going to say error message. There we go. And let's say that's good enough for now. All right. Now, let's say that we are looking for certain things in the form to be filled out, and if people didn't fill a certain part of the form out, then we're going to give them an error message. Let's imagine that we require them to give their last name over here in the last name field. Now earlier when we built this, take a look over here, we have an error state for it. So we already have this field ready to go with some sort of error state. And so we've got this field. Now I'm going to give it a name because we're going to refer to it in an interaction. I'm going to call it last name input. I tend to call my text fields inputs just because it's shorter than text field. So you can name it field or whatever you like. Oh, let's X this out. We don't need to be searching icons right now. Well, maybe we do need to search icons, but let's imagine that if people didn't type anything in the last name field, we want to give them an error. That means when people hit the submit button, different things could happen. If different things could happen, this means we're going to need cases and we're going to need conditions. So first, let's imagine that we only see the success message if something, anything is written in the last name field. That way they didn't leave it blank. And then we'll build so that if they left it blank, we give them an error message. So on the submit, I'm going to go and add a condition. And the condition is going to be last name not blank. So I want to just make sure that the last name field isn't blank. Even if someone wrote one letter, let's say we accept that. Let's say there isn't a minimum number of characters that we want because some people have very short last names and we don't want to tell those people they didn't put in a correct last name. So let's say it just has to be not blank, even if one letter is written in there. Now, Axure says, okay, I'm guessing at a condition, and how am I doing? Is the text on this submit? Well, hold on, what's this? This is the submit button. No, we don't care what the submit button says. We don't care what the text on the submit button is. So this is definitely not the right thing. However, we are wondering about text on a widget. We are wondering if anybody has typed anything into the last name field. Hey, Axure, go find that last name input. And okay, so does it equal a thing? Well, no, they could have written anything. We have no idea what they wrote. So what I like to do here is does not equal, and then leave this blank. So hey, Axure, here's a condition. Can you check that the text on the last name input does not equal blankness? Now, hypothetically, even a space would mean that this is not blank. So someone could fool you and not really write the thing. But again, for the purposes of a prototype, this is good enough. So we could say if the last name is not blank and they're submitting the form, show the success message. So for example, I could say, let's baby step test it and make sure our condition works. First, let's write something in here. And that should meet the condition, and we get success. Now, similarly, if I take this out and we try again, we're going to get nothing because we didn't tell Axure to show the error message, but it will not pass the condition to show the success message. So I am clicking on the submit button and nothing's happening. So that condition was written correctly. Now let's take a look. Writing still on the submit button, what if we wanted there to be another condition where if there's nothing on this thing, we show people an error message? That means we need another case. Remember that a case is just a whole other set of possible outcomes that could happen on the same event, the clicking or the tapping. So what if the last name is blank? All right, so we could say if the text on the widget last name input equals blankness, then, hey Axure, there's something else I need you to do. Notice we have the condition, but we didn't tell Axure what to do. Don't make that mistake. That's a common mistake. You start with the condition and you never tell Axure what to do about it. So we might say, first of all, let's set the error state on the last name panel, the last name input. So set the error state. That will make it turn to the visual styling we created in the global widget style for a form field with an error. And we're also going to want to show our error messages panel. But remember, the first state of the error messages panel is success. If we just show the panel, it's going to say success. That means first, before we show the panel, we have to say, hold on, there's actually a different state of the panel that I want to show. I want to show the error state. Now, some people also check off show panel if hidden, but that's not going to give you the fancy schmancy fade in that I like, at least the way that I like it. So I tend to add the additional instruction just so I have super control over this of animating in the messages panel with a show and a fade. And of course, you can do the light box or other things that you wanted to. We don't have to say bring target to front because we said that in the pin to browser. So again, taking a look at this, in this case, instead of showing the success message, we are going to set the error state on the field, set the messages panel to an error state, and show the messages panel, but we're not going to wait and have the error message go away. We're going to need something else to make the error message go away. So let's take a look. If this is blank and I just click submit, okay, let's scroll a little bit. So notice I get the error message. This is now in the error visual state, but typically there's a few other things we want to do with an error to help out our user, especially where there is a single error. There's only one thing here that they have to fix, or it's the first thing they need to fix. Maybe multiple fields here are erroring out because they weren't filled in. One thing we want to do is drop the person's cursor into this field so they can more quickly fix their own error. And the way that we do that is focus. I've mentioned before that focus means the cursor is in a place, and lost focus is the cursor is no longer in that place. So let's do a focus to put the cursor there to help our friends fix this error. Where do we want to focus? Last name input. Do we want to select text that already exists here? Probably not, because we're doing this because it was empty. So we don't want to pre-select any text that was written here. Let's baby step test this again. Nothing in that field. Submit. And notice my cursor blinking in that field where I can now start typing my name. But hypothetically, you might want, once people start typing their name, as soon as there's even one character in there, you might want to make the error message go away and this visual error field go away. I would build that not on the button, because the action isn't happening because someone did something with this button. The action is happening because people are typing stuff on here. So Axure's got something for that. Don't worry. So we can say, hey Axure, did the text on this change? So the text change would be people are typing things or people are removing characters. They're backspacing. Any change to the text would trigger Axure to see if they can run your interaction. So hey Axure, did the text change? Well, If the text changed because they wrote something, which means, uh-oh, I just said if, I'm going to need a condition. Ooh, sneaky foreshadowing. If the text changed because they're writing something, then I want to take the messages panel and hide it with a fade out because they are fixing their mistake, so I don't want them to see the error message anymore. And take that error state that we put, well, actually it's on this. We're dealing with the last name input right now, so we could say this or last name input, remove the error state. And we don't have to do anything with the focus. We're already in the field typing something, fixing our mistake. Now, we didn't write our condition yet, but let's baby step test at this point to see that if we generate an error message and then start typing in that field, do we fix the error message? So submit L. Great. So now it did both things. The error message went away, and then this field started looking like a normal field rather than an error field. But what happens if I backspace? Now you have to decide whether you immediately want to try to error somebody out again, which can be super annoying, or if you're going to wait to error them out at the point of submit. So up to you. If you're not going to kind of re-error them out, then you might need to write some conditions here. That would be a condition that says, if the text on this widget equals blankness, set the error state and show that error message. But personally, I kind of hate when forms do that. When I'm trying to type and I backspace because I want to see the hint again. Remember, they just might want to see the hint again. We don't need to error them out. They haven't specifically messed it up yet. But one thing that will tell us they messed it up is if we lose focus and the field is still blank. So this would be if we want to correct errors as people move through a form. If I go from this field to this field, but this field was required and I left it blank, you might want to error me out right away. So let's take a look at that. That would be lost focus. Let's build it. So it's a totally separate thing than text changed. Text changed is, are people typing or backspacing, and are there new letters or numbers or removing characters? This is, did we lose focus? Did somebody leave this field? So on lost focus, maybe we want to set the error message. So set the error state on this widget, which is still the last name input, set the error state. Now it's up to you whether or not you also want to show the big error message saying danger, fix your stuff, or if you just want to have the single field error. And let's just practice with that. And yes, I am going to practice also with an error message near the field itself, but let's get there in baby steps. So there's my submit. Oops, I'm fixing it. And now let's say I backspace out and I go, all right, now I'm going to move to this field. And let's say I click in this field. Okay, so notice I now have the error state here. You would hope that that draws my attention to that. You do have the option of refocusing someone's cursor here, though that might confuse them because they might start typing whatever they wanted to here, but all of a sudden their cursor is here and they're typing it here and they're going, whoa, wait a minute, I thought I was typing over here. So you have to decide whether or not you want to focus that cursor. You might need to usability test that and see if it makes sense to people or not. And then of course, once they're typing in here, this should go away because we already wrote that. Now let's imagine that when we have an error at a field level that another message pops up. Now let's say that I very quickly design something off to the side. Let's get our scary triangle. And again, you can globally style this or you can manually style it. I'm going to, I probably should have done, let's do, this isn't a perfect square, so let me lock this and say this is 12 wide. Ooh, that's very small. Let's make it a little bit bigger. It is going to be a warning. We don't want it to be that small. Let's run with 20. Or maybe I go by height. Yeah, that's not bad. And again, you can color this with global widget styling or quick manual color. But again, I like the global widget styling because that means everywhere where this shows up, it's always going to be the same color. You could even make this a component if you wanted to. Totally up to you. You know, the icon alone. Sometimes I make icons alone components so that I can globally control that icon and its size and its color. Let's imagine that we're going to put something here that's got an error message. Now, before I build this, I want to talk for a moment about accessibility. So, how do we make sure that our errors are going to be accessible, especially to someone who might be using a screen reader? I recommend highly getting to know the current best practices for accessibility. I'm on a page, it's December 2021 for me. This page was last updated January 2021. Feel free to Google this and find whatever is the latest best practices for accessibility. I'm on the WebAIM website, and I'm looking at usable and accessible form validation and error recovery. So this reminds you that people are using different types of input devices and screen readers, and so if a form has a mandatory field, it is better to write out the word required. Otherwise, people hear star, though I imagine at this point they know what that is. Do you want to hide your form labels? Some people hide form labels and they only have what's in the hint text, but I like their point that you might ask yourself why you are hiding the form label, but then you want the screen reader to read it, so maybe it's important for everybody. And then, of course, we have to think about form errors and helping someone who's using a screen reader recover from that error. So they're recommending that there be a pop-up of some sort, kind of a dialog box saying that there was an error, reading out to the user exactly what the error was, and then giving them a way to say, okay. But there's another way to do it, which is if you are going to give people a message on top, like we've been building, they recommend that you list out the errors that people have made and give them links to jump down the page to fix those errors. Now, this is definitely something that you would know how to build in Axure. You would know how to build a sentence where some of the words are linked and have a linked look and jump down the page. That was our scroll to, and would also then place the cursor in that field if they selected that, which would be focus. So you could absolutely build this, you know how. The downside is that without a lot of advanced Axuring, you're not going to necessarily know which fields they didn't write in and therefore which fields to list at the top among your errors. You would end up having to use a repeater or whatever, but I normally tell people this is a prototype. If I didn't enter if I entered my first name and the error came up with please enter your first name, I wouldn't freak out. I would just remind people this is a prototype and this is just a sample error message. I do believe it's okay for us to use some things that are not completely realistic if it helps us build our prototypes faster and is still realistic enough for people to test it out, where we could say, well, imagine that this error message was relevant to you. You know, what would you do next? So remember to make sure that we're thinking about accessibility when we are building these things. We've got the inline errors approach, but remember that lighting up the field is really not going to be enough. You know, just showing that this is in an error state is probably not enough for a screen reader, because will the screen reader know something's going on there? So just remember, as you think about errors, to make sure you are looking for the best practices in accessibility, and especially related to people who are using screen readers and cannot see these messages and are going to rely on what the screen reader tells them. So that being said, let's jump back to Axure and let's imagine that we are going to build a very visual error message. So just for kicks, I'm going to drag this out. And again, some people will make this red or they'll make it white on a red background. I'm not going to worry about styling this right now. I just wanted to show you the technique and not worry so much about the visual styling. You know how to do the visual styling by now. So, and again, we didn't make labels here, so we never had a label that said this field is required, and that might help as well, certainly reduce errors. So no, I don't believe that we should only have a field with no label on it. I was just teaching you how to make form fields. Now for this, because this is going to show or hide based on different things we want to trigger Axure to do, some people will put this in a group and show or hide the group, but you know me, I'm going to put it in a dynamic panel because it's just my habit. So I'll call this last name error panel, and by default people can't see it. So I've clicked on the eyeball, I've crossed it out. It's a yellow panel now when I click away from it, so that means there is a panel or a hidden element there, but people don't see it. So we could go back into some of our interactions and we could say, hey, you know, when you click on this, also show this message. Hey, if you error them out here, also show this message, etc., etc. But I can't help but wonder if there's an easier way. And like we did with the carousel lesson, there is an easier way. Rather than having to build all kinds of things that also trigger this error message, we can just tie the error message to whether or not the error state has been set on this panel. So I can add to my interactions, and that's a completely new event. It's got nothing to do with text changing. It's got nothing to do with lost focus. It has to do with, was the error state set? If the error state of this field has been set, then show, where's my little guy, at last name error panel, maybe dramatic fade in, it's up to you. And then of course I want the other event as well, which is if the error state is removed, which means the field is no longer the pink that we made it, I would want to hide the last name error panel, maybe with a dramatic fade out. And let's give it a try. So if this field is empty and I submit, I should get the top error message and the error state will be set on the panel, but now that will also create a domino effect where the error state will show the field level error message. And again, you might say, oh my God, Deb, this is so many errors and messages. You've made this thing look like it's a catastrophe. Well, of course, we can fix that or improve it by changing some of the visual styling. Maybe this just has a red outline and isn't a giant pink box. Maybe this error message is a little bit softer. Maybe it has a red outline and it's not a giant red box. Or maybe this box is more about, hey, you've got some fields you didn't fill out. Click here to jump down and fill them out, like WebAIM suggests. So it could be more of that type of panel rather than all of these crazy color warnings and triangles and whatever. So I've definitely over-designed this, and you could do a better job. But notice that because we have now tied this field level error to whether or not this is in its error state, as soon as I type something and the error state goes away, this is set error state false, then this message also disappeared. Now there's one more thing that we need to fix here, which is if we have something typed in the box and we submit, do you remember what's supposed to happen? I know, it was like a whole 10 minutes ago. We are supposed to get a success message. Submit. Okay, what happened? Why didn't that work? So we need to go back and take a look at some of the things we've written on the submit button to check how we can fix this. So first of all, we don't want an error message to show up. We would definitely want the positive message to show up, but let's take a look at how that happened. Let's go into the console and let's imagine that I've typed something here. And we're going to watch our debugging trace. Now, it's telling me that I have an error message on my last name, but I wrote a last name there. That tells me we have a mistake in a condition somewhere because we wrote our last name, but it's still showing us an error message. Let's take a look at what happened. So we said, hey, Axure, if the text changes, we must want to show or hide this panel, we're going to need a condition here. So if the text changes, hide the panel or the last name. Well, hold on. That's not the only thing that can happen here. Let's fix this. We need a couple more conditions and cases here. So if the text changed and the field is now, we have a last name written, or, again, last name not blank, then we write that similar condition that we did last time. Is not the last name error panel, that's our error message. Is the last name input not equal to blankness? If it's not equal to blankness, then hide the messages and hide the, don't take off the error state. Okay, so why am I getting an error when I click away from this? Now, clicking away from this is lost focus. That means that there's something wrong with our lost focus that is making it give us an error state, an error message, whether or not we wrote something in there. Sounds like we need a condition so that we can be more specific. Let's take a look at our lost focus. Lost focus, set error state to true. So you can see without a condition, this tells Axure, no matter what happened, if someone leaves this field by clicking out of the field, by tabbing out of the field, error them. Okay, well that's not right. We're going to need some conditions here. We only want the error to happen if the last name is blank. So if the last name is blank, then we've got yes, text on widget, yes, this, we're dealing on the last name right now. If the last name equals blankness, then give people an error. Let's see if that fixes it. Because that way, if Axure sees something in there, so if we're in this field and then we click out, it's blankness, we got the error. If we come back to this field and we type something and we click out, we didn't get the error. So it's so important to troubleshoot these things and notice where the mistake is happening. I could tell my mistake was happening on focus because it only happened when I lost focus. So that meant there was something wrong with my lost focus, not with a focus. Lost focus. It only happened when I left the field. And that would have been true, again, whether I clicked outside of it or maybe I tab. So here I am pressing tab. Oop. There you go, same thing. So I could tell that that lost focus was the problem because this happened when we lost the focus. And then you'll remember we told Axure to give us an error state no matter what the conditions were, whether people typed something in here or didn't type something in here, show people error messages. Well, that's not right. We only want to show them error messages if this is blank and they're leaving the field. So let's take a look back at what we were shooting for before, which is what if we put in our last name and then we click submit? We should get the success message. Okay, looks great. Now what happens if we mess around on this page a little bit and we generate our error message, submit? Ooh, error message. Let's fix it. Put our name in. Now let's try submitting again. Error message. Okay, do you know why we're seeing the error message? The reason is because, as I mentioned before, once you set a panel state to a certain panel, that's the panel that will, that's the state that will automatically be shown next time you show the panel, unless you specifically tell Axure which state to show. Now, we had on the button that if we're showing the error message first, set, here it is, set panel state to error. But you can see up here, we just show the panel and we never set which state we want. So we're going to want to sneak in here and I'm going to click over here and I'm going to say set panel state of the messages panel to success. Now, this might work out a little bit weird. This says show the panel and then set it to success. You do run the risk that people see that error message for a fraction of a second before Axure changes it to success. So I like to drag and drop this to change the order so that the panel state is changing while nobody can see the panel. The panel is not visible, it is hidden. We'll change it to success then we'll show it. So remember, when you've got a panel with multiple states and you're trying to show states at different times for different reasons, make sure you are specifically telling Axure which state of the panel you want to show, and that is very often the first thing on my actions list so that I know I'm going to show the correct panel. If your panel is correctly showing but it's the wrong message, you probably missed the set panel state, which would change which message people saw. Now we can baby step test this. First, I can also close the console. We're done looking there. First, I can generate my error message by saying warning. Then I can fix it by typing something in here. And then when I say submit, I should get the success message. So there you go. That's a lot of stuff about messing with error states and error messages, having messages come up in one general place, having messages come up in one specific place. So these are all kinds of things that you would need to build if you wanted to have more realistic forms and validation. Now, in my advanced course, I tend to go into there. What if we had to validate multiple fields at the same time? So there are some more advanced topics to learn here, but for now you probably know enough to start experimenting with this and to make a prototype that's good enough because it will show some error messages to people and you can see how they respond to those and if they feel like they can fix the error themselves, which would be great for heuristics. So in that case, I'll see you in the next lesson.